Hey there, everyone. This is Joe Laloon, and I've got something incredible to share with you. If you're looking to supercharge your health, I've discovered a game changer. It's called Magnesium Breakthrough from Bioptimizers. I've personally been using Magnesium Breakthrough and recommending it to everyone, clients, friends, and family. The first day I tried it, I felt a noticeable difference compared to other magnesium supplements that I've used in the past. Now, here's the thing about magnesium. It's not just about taking more of it. There are different types, each crucial for specific functions in your body. Magnesium chelate, citrate, biglycinate, malate, sucrosomial, taurate, and orotate. Magnesium Breakthrough gives you all of these forms in the optimum dose. The benefits are incredible, from promoting heart health and improving stress resilience to enhancing mood, cognitive function, and metabolic health. It even supports exercise performance and helps with better sleep quality. Let's face it, we can all use a boost in at least one of these, right? That's why I'm excited to share with you this exclusive offer. Head to the link in our show notes and use the code 3phase10, that's the number 3, PHASE10, for a fantastic 10% off your order. Don't miss out on this chance to upgrade virtually every function in your body. Try Magnesium Breakthrough today because your health deserves the best. What's up, everyone? My name is Joe Laloon, and welcome to the Three Phase Podcast. Today's guest is our old friend, Ste Lane. Ste is a coach and a host of the Radical Health Radio podcast, where he has interviewed the likes of Mark Sisson, George St. Pierre, and Paul Saladino. And he has been hosting wellness retreats that have helped redirect and propel people to better versions of themselves. In this episode, we discuss his big move to a new state, creating sovereignty and action in your life, experimenting to find your own personal nutrition, and breaking free of the dogmatic fitness industry. Ste and I previously recorded a 2-part podcast called Regaining Your Manhood. You can find it in the archives of the Three Phase Podcast under episode 003. And you can find Ste on Instagram at Peak Primal Health. And now let's dig into the episode.
The Three Phase Podcast is starting now.
Good? I think we're good. All right, Ste Lane, welcome back to the Three Phase Podcast. Glad to reconnect with you.
Thanks for having me back, man. You must be a glutton for punishment for doing another one.
Yeah, I like it. Keep my ears filled.
There you go.
Well, we haven't really, it was a while ago when we did our first podcast, so a lot has happened in that time frame. And I thought, we were just in the southern states and we were just kind of chatting a little quickly about that. Let's maybe go back to the move to Tennessee and sort of what sparked that initial change for you, or that big change for you.
Big change, yeah. Went from city life in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is not the craziest city in the world, but it's pretty densely populated. And Florida was where we landed during the pandemic with the closures and such. Florida seemed like a logical place to go because they were kind of just getting on with business. And thankfully, I had the online gig, the online coaching, so we weren't location bound anywhere. So we moved from a pretty rural place, which is where Joe and I came to meet, Tyler Hill, Pennsylvania, little rinky-dink town in the middle of nowhere in like the Pocono-ish mountains of PA. And we were there for a few years. We were running this bed and breakfast for the previous camp directors. The current camp directors. We were previously the owners of this bed and breakfast. And we loved the country life, but we didn't like so much the really harsh, long winters. It was like really cold for what felt like forever. But it was
Way
probably like 6 months of way too long. So Florida was really nice to mix it up. Like I said, life was pretty much as normal during those few crazy years, and we were enjoying it. We were enjoying the weather. It felt nice to live where people vacationed and be like, oh, this is home. Something crazy happened, though. We'd spent a year there, and we loved it, and we were planning on spending another year there. But we also knew that it wasn't going to be our forever home. We had our son, Jai, would have been about 1 at the time. But we decided 1 more year. I'd embedded myself in the community a little bit. I had some coaching clients locally for the first time in a while, back in person at the gym. Was also doing my online thing and just had a good, like-minded community. So we were living in this small little apartment, and we found a house in the same neighborhood, which we really liked. And we were going to move into it and upgrade. And because it was an accelerated timeline, we had to give up the lease on the apartment that we were in. And we did that. And our landlord was super gracious. He said, you know what, pay us half a month's rent and I'll let you break it. No dramas. So we did. St. Pete is a very hot market. So he filled somebody immediately. And basically, with 4 weeks left until the move, the person that was going to rent us the house bailed on the deal, leaving us with nowhere to live, because we reached out to our current landlord and he said, look, I like you guys, you've been great, but I ain't trying to get in legal trouble with you. I've taken money off someone, I've signed contracts, yada, yada, yada. So we're kind of like, oh shit. We have 4 weeks left to live. A week later than this, I'm going on retreat to the Dominican Republic. So I take, we kind of just like gather our thoughts and we're like, okay, we're going to look for somewhere else to live. And we didn't realize how crazy the rent was going everywhere, in particular in Florida. So then we was like, maybe we should buy. And then we realized how little our money would get us in Florida. So quickly, the area started to expand of where we could look. We had this blessing that, in the nature of my work being online, we could theoretically go everywhere. The reason I mentioned small town PA, Tyler Hill, was because we did enjoy the country life. We didn't want to go back all the way up north, though, because of the harsh winters. So as we started to look at places that would make sense, it was like North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, potentially Arizona, because my brother was over there, like just random places. And Tennessee seemed to tick all the boxes. Yeah. So I took an emergency flight there, got a hire car, 2 days, drove around all of these areas, trying to see what just fit, what fit the style and the culture and the vibe that we were looking for. Long story short, I didn't even come to where I am now, which is outside of Cookeville. I didn't know Cookeville existed. We left kind of saying like, Knoxville's pretty cool, Chattanooga's pretty cool, let's look in those areas. All of this happens in a few days. I go to the Dominican Republic. I'm on retreat. I'm leading retreat. I have no cell phone service. My wife's at home scrambling like crazy to find us a place to live. And she texts me one day when I'm on retreat saying, I think I've found the spot. It's in Cookeville. So we haven't been there, but the house is cool. Check it out. So I'm running up to this little shack to get Wi-Fi before I have to lead a group, class. And the Zillow link won't load. It's just spinning out. And I'm like, but I trust my wife's judgment. So I made a gut feeling call to say, looks great, babe. Do whatever you've got to do. Make the offer, blah, blah, blah. So then I do the whole day of retreat. I basically forget about this. At the night, I go back up to check. She's like, all right, offer submitted. We'll see. The following morning, she's like, this is moving fast. Offers accepted. We're going to move to Cookeville, Tennessee. Never seeing where we live. So it was a bit of a divine intervention moment, because then it was just a few weeks later. We had a spontaneous stint of being homeless for a little bit, where we moved in with Nicole's mum to kind of fill the space, still in Florida. Then we packed up our small little life in a U-Haul. I drove that U-Haul to Tennessee. My wife and son flew up there, and in December, just before Christmas, a few years ago, we moved up and we became Tennesseans after never stepping foot on the property, never stepping foot inside of Cookeville city limits, arriving in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of winter, because we are out there, we don't have neighbors, we're on land, and it's just kind of like, okay, guess this is home. Shortly thereafter, spring comes, everything starts to bloom. It's beautiful here. Knowing what I know now, the community's amazing. Found a lot of really cool things. And I think we're in a perfect spot. We're like 20-ish minutes from downtown. But that 20 minutes is all back roads and country. And we're out there and we've got our own piece of land. And it was just a really crazy trip, because it was a complete just trust in whatever you want to call it, the universe or God or whatever it was. And it worked out. So that's how Tennessee came to be. It was kind of on accident, and it's working so far. Maybe on purpose. Yeah, that's a pretty wild, just kind of blind commitment, but it has obviously worked out, and you guys are in a good spot now. And what are some of the sort of appeals that once you actually got there and saw the property? What were some of the things that like really ticked the boxes for you that were such a departure from that city life? More than anything, it's land, it's space, it's peace and quiet. I have to try very hard to go on any of my land and hear life. And when I say life, I don't mean birds or water or goats or chickens. I hear that. That is abundant here. I mean sirens and traffic and a random homeless person screaming or whatever else it is. Yeah. You don't hear that stuff here. We're so deep in nature. And something that's been really profound for me, in particular over the last 6 or 7 years, as I've just been on this journey to really find who I am, is that the most profound teacher has been nature for me. Like, nature, there's just something about it. I think nature is the closest representation of the divine that we have. There's no mistakes in nature. It's always on time. It never rushes. It has an innate intelligence and wisdom that the human mind can't even really comprehend. It's connected to the earth, literally, the place that we all come from and go back to. And it's just filled with lessons. It's filled with the cyclical nature of life and death and blooming and decay. And when you observe nature and you observe how life unfolds in nature, it can teach us a lot about ourselves. So the fact that I could find a spot that was in nature, like if I walk 50 meters off my back porch, I am in the woods.
Yeah.
It's thorny brushes and it's a steep hill and then it goes down to a creek and there's nothing back there. There's deer and there's game that run through, but I can just go down there and I can, sit and think and clear my head and just come up with all kinds of other things that I couldn't get in the city.
Yeah.
As much as I've been a fan of self-development, journaling, meditation, all of that stuff, there is an energy about cities. And if you're into that, it's really cool. But there's also a cost to it too. It's like an anxious buzz. And I feel this now with the podcast. I go out to Austin, Texas once every 6 weeks or so. And I love the energy of Austin and I love what it's got to offer, but I feel it. As soon as I land, I feel there's a different energy and it's a little harder to get into the root of the peace and stillness that you can find when you're actually in nature. Like anybody will know this if they've been camping for a weekend or something and they just get that sense of like, that's what I have on a daily basis. And I'm really grateful for that, So I think above all else, it's nature and it's space. It's, we've not got in unlimited amounts of space. We've got 5.5 acres, but it basically feels unlimited because you look in all different directions and you don't see people, you don't hear anything. So it just feels spacious. And that is, I think it's really good for your nervous system and your mental health and everything else.
Yeah. And you like coming from England, obviously you've grown up in sort of buzzy environments, and I lived in Toronto for, half a decade and that is a really buzzy environment. So
yeah.
The contrast, I think I felt the same thing when we moved to Winnipeg, even though we're still sort of in a city and in a suburb, more or less. The change, the drastic change from that anxious, buzzy energy in the city. I remember like the first night we got here and slept in our house, it was like no interruptions. It was very quiet, even though there's still cars and things like that. We're not out in the country or anything, but it was a noticeable difference as the contrast was so high, and in Toronto as an example is like, you can't go a night without hearing a siren or someone yelling or, tires screeching or motorcycles ripping down the road or whatever it is. It's very hard to escape that. And I always remember hearing this thing where, before moving sort of to this rural living, I would say, was, the camping examples. Like if you feel off and your sleeping is out of rhythm, the best thing you could do is go and camp for 24 hours and your circadian rhythm will reset and you'll feel amazing. And that's kind of probably the appeal for a lot of people for vacations. Why wanting to go on vacation all the time is so prevalent is because it's an escape from that intensity. And it leads to more of that relaxed moment. But it's in such small doses. And I think what you and I are doing is the reverse of that, is like trying to find more peaceful time with doses of that city energy.
Yeah, well said, man. I think a lot of people are like microdosing nature.
Right.
They're taking a trip to the national park or they're going on vacation, laying on a beach. And I want to microdose the quote unquote real world, the hustle bustle, the do. And I think that it's more of our natural way of being. Of course, people, they're in suburbs and cities and things like that because their livelihoods depend on it. And that's all well and good. I feel very blessed to be in a position where I don't need to do that because I think I'm a huge fan of evolutionary psychology and understanding biology and all of that stuff. And I think about this stuff a lot of the time, that as an animal, as a human evolving animal, the only time we would have stumbled across strangers 200,000 years ago, it would have been an immensely stressful thing because you didn't know whether that stranger was a friend or a foe. And there was a high likelihood that they could have been a foe. And if that's the case, what are they coming? To scout your camp, to take your things, to try and, take what is yours. And now we can plunk ourselves in cities with millions of people And we don't know any of them. And even though our rational minds can be like, oh no, people are mostly good and this is cool. And like, wow, the cities are great. You get great food and there's lots to do, which is true. The animal body can never fully rest. It can never fully relax because it's always picking up on subtle energies. And that sounds kind of woo for some people, but it's not. It's a scientifically valid thing that there are energies, fields around people. You can pick this up, and people would know it, even if they're, not willing to, explore that idea. But you just get a gut feeling, right? If you've ever been in an elevator and somebody walks in and you kind of get like, something's going on here. My spidey sense is tingling.
Right.
Our dogs are really good at this, right? They pick up on people's energies. These are the things that we might be doing more than we realize we're doing because we can't really think about them as much as feel them. And if our signals are so noisy because we're around so much buzz, the buzz of hundreds of thousands of people and vehicles and constant noise, which is all inputs that the brain has to deal with, by the way. Your mind is picking up millions of bits of information every second. It's selectively distorting and deleting what is not relevant so it can actually function. Because if you paid attention to all of the bits of information in your environment right now, you'd be thinking consciously about temperature and the sound of my voice and the little annoying noise you can hear in the corner and the fact that you can hear something across the street and the weird flavor in your mouth and I think I need a drink. So it's too much. It's overwhelming. So your brain is primarily a distortion and deletion machine. It's getting rid of most things so it can focus on the task at hand. But if there's more things to get rid of 24/7, 365 days, you can't possibly operate at your highest level of presence, at the very least. And I would argue that presence would lead to other things too, like productivity and like performance. So I think it branches into that world as well. But I think you're right. I think that reverse engineering and trying to flip the pyramid on its head and say that I'm an English kid living in America now, and I'd say that the new American dream is to have nothing to do with the American dream. The in the suburbs with a high-paying city job and the white picket fence, house, 2.5 kids, couple cars, and a dog. Now it's like, I think what people are really feeling a call to is to have some space and some land and come back home. And you see it's trendy. The homesteading life on Instagram is trendy, and nobody shows you the real side of that, by the way, because it might be cool, but it's ugly too. And there's a lot of death and there's a lot of poop and there's a lot of stuff as well. So it's all of it, but it is more real. I can tell you that because I've lived both of it. It's way more real. And I think it's way more human. I think we thrive when we're more back to our human selves.
Yeah. I saw a post that was like, the new luxury is signing off.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how it feels. And I was, about homesteading and that new challenge that you've kind of leaned into, and knowing you for a while, and probably what fueled some of the maybe some old fighting mentalities was that sort of guttural, buzzy energy that was just boiling on down deep. I had that too for sure, and I think when I moved here, I started to recognize like, oh, I had this like guard up all the time. Because I was in a city with millions of people and, brushing shoulders all day long and getting on a subway, and just the sort of overload of information that wasn't being filtered out, and the exhaustion level that went on with that, and the baseline stress that was not really baseline. It was actually pretty high, and I didn't recognize that until I was out of that environment for a long time.
Bingo.
And unless you spend a lot of time out of that environment, it's really challenging to recognize like those spidey senses of like, your hair standing up on the back of your neck. Well, that's a predatorial, ancestral, evolutionary signal that your body is trying to give you, and you really need quiet to listen and hear all those things. What are some things that you've noticed making that shift, and then being in that environment, and then connecting more so to nature? What are some of those old signals that you're picking up on more often now? I'm always looking for ways to improve my performance in the gym and my performance in sleep. And one thing that I found that really helped me with that was magnesium breakthrough from Bioptimizers. I've been using it and recommending it to everyone, and the results speak for themselves. It's not just about taking more magnesium, it's about getting all the crucial types in one dose. With benefits like promoting heart health and improving stress resilience, it's a game changer. Use the code 3phase10, that's the number 3, PHASE10 for 10% off your order. Don't miss out on this chance to upgrade your health today.
I think I used to, and I still, like, I'm dealing with the hangover of what I think a lot of us feel like we get used to a certain, let's call it an RPM of living, like the rev counter on your car. And I think it's higher than what would be our default. I think we're oscillating at like 5,000 RPMs every single day. We're just like, brrr, and then it's coffee, and then it's a bit more coffee, and then it's get more done. And then the world tells you that your productivity is your worth. And then you're so friggin' buzzed at the end of it that you need to drink a glass of wine or smoke a little bit to unwind. And then you don't really sleep well. So then you're tired. So then you do more coffee, and then brrr, on and on and on it goes. But like, that isn't just like, you can't just remove yourself from that and be like, okay, it's all gone. It's still there, and it still wants to tick over because life is practice. And I practiced that for the first, 30 years of my life. So the hangover of learning to do less and be okay with that. We forget that we're human beings. We act a lot like human doings because it's all we do is do. It's like do.
Yeah.
My funny little jingle is, I want to sing the do song. Do be, instead of just constant doing, because it's in the being, which is the stillness, that you are able to deeper connect with who you really are. And I think that's what it's coming to more than anything else is when I do less of the doing, a lot of which is predicated on scarcity mindset of, I'm either doing it because I need to achieve something, whether it's financially, monetary, or recognition from the world, whatever it is. We're usually doing something from a need to do it. And we think if we do it, we're going to be better. We're going to be more accepted. We're going to be wealthier. We're always chasing.
Yeah.
And more of this being energy, which is like, oh, everything's good. Everything's good. Stuff still has to be done. That's why it's not just the bee song.
Yeah.
You can't just lay in the woods all the time. You have to do. But if you can dip in and out, I think when you do and you choose to do it and you come in more from that human being place where you're a bit more well-resourced and rested, you do more with less, and you need less, and that less of the stimulants, less of the hurry, less of the validation, and you can just be more comfortable being who you are. And I think people pick up on that, and when you're around other people, it rubs off on them, because again, there's that energy body thing that your presence dictates the energy of the people that you're around. If you get a bunch of anxious people in a room, you see what happens to it. It spirals upwards really quickly. And you can see if there's one person in that room that can bring it down a little bit, they can affect the whole thing. And sometimes it's not even with words. They don't have to say anything profound.
Yeah.
They can just like not join in with the madness. They can just breathe and they can bring it all down. And I think I just feel a lot more grounded in myself. I feel a lot more peaceful. I feel very hard to get rattled. Like everything's water off a duck's back.
Yeah.
Even the really shit stuff. It's just like, oh, what are we going to do now?
Right.
Where in the past, I would have been like spiraling out, blaming and complaining, saying, oh, I can't fucking believe this. This would happen to me. Poor me. This guy's fault. It's her fault. Now it's just like, okay, what's important now?
Yeah.
Because it's certainly not being a child and arguing with reality, because I'm going to lose every single time. Now it's just like, okay. So let's go. This one. So. And the next one. So.
Now what?
Now what?
Yeah. Yeah. That idea of groupthink can go both ways. And I think in the last, always in human history, we've seen that where it's like one person's outrage can turn into a group of outrageous people. But it goes the other way too. And one sort of positive person can also change the energy of a group. And I think that maybe you can kind of tell us a bit more about some of the retreats that you've been doing and how those have impacted people and grown in such a way that, each time you do one, there are new people coming and getting engaged and changing their mindset and coming out the other side of that, new people, we could say, or at least perspective shifted people.
Yeah, I think it's a large part of it is what you alluded to, which is that energy is contagious. And I think the reason that that's so important in the retreat setting, which is an in-person setting, is that we have an amazing amount of educational material, uplifting material, you name it. Like, get on your Instagram, go on your YouTube, and if you're smart with how you curate your information diet, you can consume unbelievable stuff these days for free. It's incredible. You know, the PhD on this and this expert on this, and then download a free audiobook from the great spiritual masters, and you can consume that all day long. The issue is we have this adage that knowledge is power. And I think that's missing a step. It's something more like knowledge is potential, because it can only be powerful if it's applied. And I think we are doing something that's akin to the way we eat now, which is creating a lot of obesity and excess. I think we've got an intellectual obesity. I think we are actually starving for experiential knowledge and wisdom. I think we've got lots of information. I think we've got lots of knowledge, which means we have lots of potential, but I don't think many people know how to apply it. And this is the problem with purely information. It's the problem with purely consuming online material or purely reading books, is that unless you experience it, unless you feel it, it's very hard to take that as an idea and authenticate it and turn it into like living wisdom. And you can do that with ideas that you get, because you have to test them and apply them. And then over time, you'll get the validation and be like, oh yeah, this is really working for me. The retreat is a pressure cooker of that. Right. So it's like, you know, you've got an instant pot. You've got the slow cooker that you can do your bone broth in 24 hours, or you've got your instant pot and you can do it in 90 minutes. The retreat is the instant pot. You know, it really turns up the pressure on that, because not only you're being exposed to good ideas, but you're around people that are living it. And because energy is contagious, and because from day one, when everybody comes in slightly anxious, who are all these strangers, to day 4, when everybody's leaving, crying, holding each other, being like, oh my God, you're like, I feel like we've lived lifetimes together. You're my best fucking friend, and I didn't know you 4 days ago. Because they've shared something so real, so profound, so human, through all of the experiences. Like, we don't just sit and talk about feelings. We play, we wrestle, we play silly little games, we do roughhousing, we do all kinds of stuff. And then we also do breath work, and we meditate, and we talk about life, and we talk about mental models. But it's all in person, it's all pressure cooked. We eat together, we live together, we sleep together. Not like that. It's not a swingers retreat. I just mean we sleep in the same environments. And everybody does go out a different person, because it's like kind of a working definition of an initiation, if you will, which is where everything you thought to be true yesterday is no longer true today. Now, you might be in the same body and you might look the same as when you leave, but if everything you thought to be true yesterday when you came into this retreat is no longer the same as when you leave it, you're a different person. And I think that's, you know, fundamentally what humans want to do consistently in our lives. Not just once, but keep reinventing ourselves through phases. Like, you will know that you are not the same as when you were 13 or when you were 23, and then when you were 28, and then when you became a dad, and then what you're going to be when you're 40. It's constant evolution, and that means letting go of some of the stuff that no longer serves you. So I think the retreat it's all of it, man. It's good laughs with good people, really good just like high vibe energy, because we're always doing them in cool places. Like, the next one is April 5th, and it's in Costa Rica. You know, it's in the mountains, lush greenery, you're eating fresh organic food from the land, and you're obviously you're not going to have a shit time out there, you know. But at the same time, we're doing work, right? We're really digging in, and we're trying to like excavate some stuff from people, whether it's some stuff they need to let go of, whether it's self-limiting beliefs, or whether it's something that's, you know, just held them back, a lack of clarity in their life, a trauma. You know, that word gets thrown around a lot these days, but these are the kind of places where these things can come out and be held by the group, and we feel safe like that if it's curated well. And I think people are missing that, because, you know, we're the most connected we've ever been, at least technologically and socially, but it seems kind of the most lonely at the same time, because we're living lives mediated through screens. And I think people seek these experiences in a big way. And I think that's what we're doing with them.
Yeah, it's super cool to see. And I think one thing that's interesting about that is that we are flexible beings living rigid lives. As in, you know, we have the same location, we go to our jobs every day, we do the same route to get there. We see the same people, if we see them at all, in person every day, you know, generally eat the same foods. And if we kind of look, you know, back and see how we moved and lived these, you know, nomadic lives, and we came across other tribes and traded and, you know, met new people, but not often, and spend sort of, you know, intense time together, you know, sitting around a fire, doing a hunt, and then eating together. Like those kind of human traits are definitely lost in this sort of modern world. And one thing the idea of the retreat does, like you said, like the pressure cooker idea. But I think the other thing that's important as well is that there's a syllabus that goes with it. It's not random. It's not like, pulling from every source of information on the planet and going like, okay, we got 4 days to get 1 million checkpoints done. It's like, no. We've got 8 checkpoints that we need to do over 4 days. And they're going to be really important, and they're going to be in a specific order, and they're going to, provide high value with less work in terms of like less content. And I think that's one thing that if someone did a retreat, like they went and experienced it, and then they took even a few lessons out of that into their daily lives, what do you think a few of those things would be in terms of like how we look at information or how we communicate with other people? What are some different ideas that would come out for someone after doing a retreat like that?
Yeah, it's a good point you raised. Like, we specifically designed the retreat so that there's 4 full days of like work days. And the reason we've done that is an evolution in my understanding and some really cool things that I'm learning, that we work now like directionally. So like the first day is in the east, and the second day is in the west, and then the third day in the north, and the last day in the south. And what that's all based on is kind of ancient cosmology. And people think this gets really woo really quickly, but cosmology is like the oldest science that we have. Cosmo is just the universe, and ology is a branch of science. So it's the study of the universe. And guess what? You can't really study the universe because we don't have any fucking clue what it is. So people have to create some working cosmology of their own. Like, what drives you? What drives the world? Who are you? How do you have a direct relationship to source or not? It doesn't matter. We're not here to tell people what to believe, to say you have to believe in this teacher or this book or that book. It doesn't matter. But what you do need is an orienting set of principles. So you do need a cosmology, right? And we all worship something. And what I've learned through studying one of the oldest cosmologies on the world called Andean cosmology, which comes from, Peruvian lineage, it's about 20,000 years old, is a working technology that in each one of these directions, there's fundamental teachings. So in the east, for example, is the direction of sunrise. So the element that's associated with that is with the fire. It's the fire that started everything. It's the fire essence that, keeps us safe. It's the turning of the darkness into the light. So the night becoming the day starts with the fire, the element in the east, the sun rising, illuminating things that we otherwise couldn't see. And in each of these doorways, there is a polarity to play with. So in the east, for example, the associated polarity is gratitude in its positive pole. Like, we really explore what that means, because you hear all the time, like Andrew Huberman says, do 3 gratitude things every day and you'll live 25% longer. And it's very much stuck in the head. It's very, I'm going to do it because these people told me to do it. And I know that the science says it's good. And people that practice gratitude every day report feeling happier than adding $50,000 to your salary. These are all like scientific ideas that are validated. But like, how can we bring an idea from the head into an embodied experience and like feel it? But polarity isn't just all love, light, and rainbow dust. It's the polarity. It's the full owning of all of it. So there's heads and tails. Everybody only wants to focus on the positive. So the shadow side of gratitude is anger. So we explore both of these in depth. Like, what does it mean to feel gratitude? How can we practice gratitude with one another? What are some practices? What are some prompts? How can we meditate on that? And then guess what? We're going to get into our anger too. Like, because in so many spaces, there's no room for anger. Yeah. We're told that anger is like a low vibration thing, and anger is a sin, and just hide it, and you shouldn't be angry. No, guess what? Most people are angry, and anger represents something. Now, if you try and suppress anger enough, and it keeps coming in and it has nowhere to go, it's going to burst out sideways. Yeah. You're going to lash out, whether you use words in an angry way and you hurt someone, whether you physically lash out and you kick your dog, or you do something stupid, you hurt yourself because you're so angry at the world. All because we're told, like, just don't be angry, just kumbaya. No, like, we're gonna express it in a safe way, and we're gonna own it, and we're gonna use it. We're gonna alchemize it. It's turning lead into gold, right? Like, you think anger's a bad thing. Well, what if you can use the anger in a way to burn away the truth, or the untruths rather, of everything that's not serving you in your life? What if you realize that the reason you're angry is because you have no fucking boundaries, and you're allowing anyone and everyone to trample all over you, and you don't know what you stand for? So that's why you're angry, because you're a friggin' doormat. Like, what if you use it to bring a greater sense moments of clarity and understanding in your life. And guess what? Using the anger in that profound way pulls you back into gratitude. And now you're feeling hopeful and happy again. And, we theme days like that. So then you bop over to the West and the North and the South, and each one has these kind of themes and teachings. So what you end up with is hopefully my kind of goal for everybody is to pull away one key fundamental perspective shift from each day. Because there's this adage, and I believe that it's true, that the world is like a mirror, that we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. Therefore, if you want to change what you see, you must change what is looking. And that's why I think perspective is the only thing I'm really trying to give somebody, a different way of looking at the way they've always looked at something. Because it changes their internal narrative. It changes the story that they tell about the thing. And it actually changes what is seen. So what is seen is influenced as much by the seer as what is, actually the seer's looking. So it's a lot of conundrums like that, and philosophical things, and then ground it in the practical of like, okay, with all of that said, now what's coming up for you, and let's work with it. And now what are we going to do to, feel into these practices? What are we going to do to express gratitude more in our lives? What are we going to do when we're feeling angry? Maybe you need to join a jiu-jitsu gym and go be in a safe environment where you can get your ass beat, and eventually you beat other people's asses, and you get it out in a safe way. Not so you're the guy at 2:00 in the morning, drunk, trying to start a fight because you're angry at the world. And, picking on the wrong person and, getting your head bounced off the pavement. So it's like philosophical and practical at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's like such an important thing in the era of self-help. I've had lots of conversations with people, obviously, with what I do, and or just in passing, in passing, and where they say, "Oh yeah, I'm reading this book now, and I've been listening to this podcast," and it's like, that's a lot of information. What are you doing with all of that?
Yeah.
Because it just sort of seems like you're consuming a lot of different stuff, which in itself is helpful, but you've used this term, the mental masturbation term,
Bingo.
Where you're just taking in, you're just consuming, you're just doing more consumption of something else, whether it's like consuming food or consuming content on TV, or you're consuming self-help. It's sort of more of the same. And having the application of some information. And I think like that's something I've said to people is how are you applying this information? Because it's maybe the best question people could ask themselves. You finish a book and you put it down, and maybe hopefully you took notes as you're reading it, and you can look back at it and say, okay, here's 12 lessons that I took from this. What am I actually going to do with that? And I think in the retreat environment, because it is compact, you couldn't just stand there and lecture them and say like, okay, here's 30 things I'd like you to do by Sunday, go. You have to just provide groundwork and principles that people can sort of fill in the gaps with.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, man. I think, we're just getting off on ideas and not actually doing anything with them. That's the mental masturbation. And, it's a pick your poison kind of thing. It's probably better to be addicted to consuming material than it is to consuming heroin. Yeah. But it's still like a manifestation of something else. Just this need. We're in this culture of just, we've been trained to be consumers.
Yeah.
So it's part of the like unplugging out of that and just saying like, there's nothing wrong with consuming. I still consume a lot of material.
Yeah.
But I balance it with application. So it's action, it's action. And one of my personal mantras is messy action. What I talk about all the time to clients, whether it's business coaching clients, whether it's health, it's messy action. The reason it's messy action is too many people get caught up on being perfect. They want to do the Andrew Huberman 20-step morning routine that's going to take 45 minutes. And they get stuck in this like productivity dysmorphia where the only reason they're doing anything that's healthy is because somebody told them that it was healthy and it's going to increase the productivity by 25%. And it's just like, stop. You don't need to do all the things perfect, but you do need to take action, and you can give yourself permission that it can be bloody messy. You don't need to wait to order the organic meditation pillow to start sitting down and just trying to quiet your mind. You don't need to have the athletic greens to have a perfect morning routine. Like, do what you can with what you've got. Take messy action, because Action creates more clarity than any amount of thinking ever will. Action, even on what you have right now, if you listen to this podcast, thank you for consuming. And secondarily, understand something. You don't need to consume any more material for the remainder of your life. I'm confident of that. I think if you took all the ideas that you already had and you truly applied all of them, you fucking crush it.
Yeah.
But you know, like it's balancing the needs and the desires and the fact that we do have a little bit of FOMO, because I want to see the latest podcast on this because I love that guy and I love this information. But let's not get lost in the sauce, and let's not forget the most important thing, which you're offering to people in conversation and your clients, which is like, cool, what are we going to do with it? How are we going to apply it? Because a lot of times that'll stump people too, right? It's like, well, I don't know, but I guess I'll try it. There you go. Do that.
I've even heard people say, like, you know, we're talking about wanting to lose weight or something like that. Like, great. What have you done to get started? And they're like, well, I got to get a few more things lined up before I start on my weight loss journey. Okay. Put the book down.
Yeah.
Just go for a walk. Start there.
Yeah.
Start taking some actual action. It doesn't matter. Like you said, messy action is better than no action. And you just got to start doing it. And I think what a recent lesson for me, well, it's actually a year-old lesson now, was getting into jiu-jitsu. And I've, done lots of sports my whole life, a lot of team sports. I've never done a martial arts sport. And, I had a friend, which was great, who kept poking me to just show up and try it. And he poked me for 2 years to show up and try it. And it was never like an ego thing that held me back, but I knew that there was going to be some like level of competition that I was going to tap into. And I was trying to like minimize that for a while because I've been doing it for so long. But once I got in that environment and recognized that, it's just a bunch of guys and girls who wanted to, do something physical and mental at the same time and challenge themselves. And what I really kind of fell in love with out of it was this idea that you are going to fail 1,000 times for every one time you succeed. And that lesson for me, especially because I had never done it before, and obviously I said my belt is see-through. It's not even white, it's see-through. That it's humbling in the best way possible because it teaches you to just do it. Just keep showing up, just try, just have your presence on, pay attention, ask questions, like all these great sort of lessons and sort of standards of practice that will propel you in everything else that you do, because the only thing you can do is start. Yeah.
Amen. And look, Nike had it right. They said, just do it. Just do it. Simple. One of the, when you do graduate from the clear belt to the white belt is also, as you move up through the ranks and you get the blue and the purple, the brown and the black one day, is to always stay the white belt though, at least mentally. It's one of my goofy little things I've said forever since I did karate for the first time as a chubby 11-year-old is white belt for life. Because it puts you in that mindset that you were just describing, like embrace the things that you're going to suck at. And that's where the growth is. Yeah. If you only do the things that you're really good at, you're basically just seeking some like kind of comfort. You're not willing to be the fool. And that's one of Jordan Peterson's, kind of claims of polarity again. If you want to be the master at something, you have to first embrace being the fool, right? You go back to Joe's athletic college career and he's like really good at lacrosse. But the first time you picked up a lacrosse stick, you probably couldn't do anything. You first looked like a fool. You dropped the ball 1,000 times. Then you got really good. Jiu-jitsu is going to be the same journey. But what else, It might be public speaking. It might be more confidently stating your needs in a relationship. It might be asking for a raise. It might be leaving the job that is just sucking you dry right now. It might be moving the state that you live in, or leaving the country, or booking a one-way ticket to Bangkok like I did. It could be so many things. Yeah. But you've got to be the white belt for life, because I think that as soon as you stop learning, and I do think that a lot of people stop learning because they associate learning with school. Yeah. And we're done with school now, so learning's over. No, learning is never over. Like, keep learning and keep trying to seek learning, and don't just confine learning to what's inside books or programs. Learning is out there in the world. It's going into a jiu-jitsu gym and getting your ass beat by like a 45-year-old sweaty dude who's just all gnarled up. He's got cauliflower ears. He's got, knuckles that look like a gorilla's hands because he's just been in there grinding for decades. Yeah. And he'll chew your Or the 16-year-old girl that's been doing it for 5 years and she gets on your back and chokes you on
Pressels
day
you.
one. Like, shit. Okay, well, this is new. But do it. Do the novel thing. It's, there's no growth in comfort and there's no comfort in growth. So we have to seek that. We have to just go out there. It's cliche as it gets, but it's cliche because it's true. Like, growth begins at the end of your comfort zone. So whatever that thing is for you right now that you're avoiding, where you're kind of like, I'll do it next year, or I'll do it when I'm 40. Like, no. Don't wait. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. Literally, it's not. Everybody massively underestimates the chances of bad things happening to them. It can happen at any moment. You don't want to live in fear, but you also want to be a realist that you don't want to piss away time. It's a very, very valuable asset, and you've only got now. And I think if there's something that's percolating on the edge of your consciousness that you're waiting to do to feel ready, or whatever other excuse you've got, is like, go do it now. The only way you get ready is by doing the thing. Ready it's a decision. It's not a feeling. And if you're ever going to feel anything like ready, it's only through action. So go do it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a bit of a conundrum for a lot of people because it's said a lot, right? Like, all you have is now. Take action, don't wait. All that kind of stuff is almost like gratitude is like just been oversaid to a point where it has no weight to it. And again, going back to like that flexibility versus rigidity lifestyle, is that if you could just take the half step out of your rigid routines, you would start to, get this little bit of a snowball effect of, oh, that really impacted me in a big way just by doing that thing that I don't normally do, just by going to the jiu-jitsu class, or just by going to the gym, or just by picking up a book if it's not something you did a lot. Those kind of actions just get you out of the line of path that you've been on for so long. And I think, and it's kind of maybe a weird thing, but not for you and I, but just taking some moments to think about time, because it's, in past worlds, they spent a lot of time thinking about passage of time and the, rise and set of a sun, and, what happens with cosmology and how these cycles occur. And, they're a lot closer to life and death. And we're so removed from it that it's like, we can do it. I'll do it in 10 years. It's fine. I'll be around here forever. Yeah. And because we don't see it often enough, and it's not something we want to like wish on people that they see, death all the time, but being a bit more aware of those cycles that happen in nature, and that we're not immortal while we're here. And if there are things you really want to do, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily bust up the full system, but maybe it is. Maybe you do have to bust up the full system. But at least just starting to move towards things that you enjoy and are passionate about, and have a draw towards, and start moving in that direction, or at least aligning yourself in that direction so you can get there.
Yeah, man, nailed it. I think the reason that, advice like seize the moment, all you have is now, feels kind of cliche and tired for people, is because the lived experience rubs against that. Because you say all you have is now, and I keep waking up tomorrow and I've kept waking up tomorrow, but at some point you are not going to wake up tomorrow. At some point you are going to look back and say, oh damn, where did that time go? There's even maybe the potential that's happened to you now. Like, this is a really interesting thought experiment that fucks people up in the best kind of way. Most people listening to this right now, I promise you, at some point in your past, you were looking forward to this phase of life more than anything else. So when you was like a 16-year-old, you were like, I can't wait to be 30 and an adult with my own car, and I'm doing it, I'm having my wife, blah, blah, blah. And now you're living in it, and you're idolizing another point in the future. Now you're saying, I can't wait till I'm 40 and I'll be higher up the corporate ladder, and then I can't wait to be retired, I'm going to play golf all day. And you just like wish your life away. And this idea then that, how do you make something like all you have is now and tomorrow is never guaranteed more palpable and realistic is meditating on death, or as the Stoics called it, memento mori. That, you have to be a lover of fate. You understand what makes life special is the fact that we die. It sounds kind of morbid, but if you think and keep death a little bit more in your consciousness, that it reminds you that you should live life well. It's not keep death in your consciousness to live in fear.
Yeah.
And that could get into a whole different conversation of how you relate to death. Like, because if you relate to death as this big scary thing that's the end, then it kind of makes sense that you live in fear of it and you try and minimize risk and you try and play it safe for as long as possible. But what if your relationship to death just needs evolving or thinking about? What if death isn't the end? What if it's a new beginning? The only thing we do know about death is that it's completely safe. Everybody does it, you know? Ramdas used to say death was like taking off a tight shoe. You know, to the soul, to the spirit, to whatever's not our human conditions. We get all in our head about death because, oh my God, I'm going to leave behind the people that I love so much and these experiences and my sons and daughters. And yeah, that's hard. That's really hard. You're in the world. You're not of it, though. I don't think, at least. That's what Jesus said. Be in the world, but not of it, right? You're a human. You have human experiences. You're going to get attached to things. You're going to love things so much that even comprehending losing them would crush your soul.
Yeah.
But you came here for something else. Like reestablishing, really thinking about what death means to you can be really profound, because death is cyclical. You know, there is no life without death. And the another cliche, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, is a death process. It's a metaphorical rebirth, right? It first must burn. It has to die, and then it's rebirthed as the phoenix. And that's why the Stoic memento mori and thinking about this and learning about that, even to the point where you can have calendars on your door where you cross off the number of weeks based on the average lifespan that you have left. You start looking at that shit when you're in your 30s and you go, oh, wait a minute, I don't have that much time left. I don't have to keep saying tomorrow or next week or next month, because it's going really fast.
Yeah.
And I think that that's valuable. It lights a fire under your ass to remember to get busy living.
Yeah. And that kind of goes back to that, what you were saying before with the sort of Eastern day of anger versus gratitude. And if you're sort of looking at lifespan or death as angry about it or fearful of it, I'm sure those two things are quite akin to each other. And if you can shift it towards gratitude, and then you're looking at each day and each plan and starting to execute on those things, now you have this literal polarity shift into actually seizing the day and actually doing the things that matter to you, and, you know, not wasting time spending it with people who are dragging you down, or environments that are messing you up, or putting food in your body that is breaking you down. And it's probably a good shift towards this idea of sovereignty and how we can start to apply that to ourselves and sort of take some responsibility in what we do, what we consume, how we live our lives. So maybe you can touch on that a bit.
I think that sovereignty, aka, you know, a personal sense of freedom and ownership, is probably the most important thing. You know, like, it's as a personal value, at least, it's certainly my orienting value. I think that feeling of having self-governance, freedom, sovereignty, and then learning to tap into that a little bit more through choices and actions is the most important thing. And I think it's worth its weight in gold. And you can do it in so many ways, you know, like there's a sovereignty over your mind in this tug of war between the lower self and the higher self, where the lower self says, eat the ice cream, watch another episode, have a beer. But then there's something else in you, like your potential, your higher self, that's like, yeah, you know what? No, not anymore. Because it's not serving me. Like, that's sovereignty over your own mind, sovereignty in your food choices, like taking back a little bit of power there, shaking the hand that feeds you, getting involved in the farmers markets, knowing where your food comes from. Then that's going to lead to sovereignty in your physical health, because you're healthier, you're stronger. Controversial take maybe, but stronger people are more useful to society. They always have been.
Yeah.
Now we live in a world where we celebrate weakness. Right. And I get that some people, you know, are weak for choices that they didn't choose. And that's tragic. And they can be strong in other ways than the physical body. But if you have an able body, and I'm calling out the men here in particular, if you have an able body and you are not actively working on your strength, and you're letting yourself get fat and soft and gross and weak, you need to have a serious look in the mirror, because that's not how you honor the gift of life. That's certainly not sovereignty. You've become a slave to whatever it is, you know, your addiction to sugar and mouth pleasure. Like, is that what you're okay with being? No. Like, I want sovereignty over that too. I want to keep going in the gyms and getting humbled, and then looking at the next guy and trying to get stronger than him, to honor the competitiveness in me in a healthy way. There's sovereignty in that. There's sovereignty in how we spent, you know, to use our free time. There's nothing wrong with watching a show every once in a while, but if that's all you do, and you realize that you're wasting hours per week on that, where you could be connecting with a loved one or working on yourself or reading, sovereignty over where you live. Like, it's everything, man. It's absolutely everything. And I think the more we can just pinch back a little bit, because we live in a world, I think, where we've been robbed of it in some ways, whether that's just a product of modern life or whether that's more nefarious, is up to the individual to decide. But I think it's taken from us, and I think we're kind of told that we're kind of not free in a subliminal way. We kind of live this illusion that we have freedom, but we don't. Look at what's happened over the last few years, and look at what will continue to happen if you don't actually exercise any kind of sovereignty and ownership over your own choices and what you do and who you say yes to and why and all of that stuff. So sovereignty is massive, dude. I think it's huge, and I think there's many ways you can do it.
Yeah, and there's so many layers, obviously, to this, and like why we ended up where we are currently. But at the same time, there's definitely room to shift or right the ship, maybe is a good way to say it. And this is, the podcast we did before was on this specifically of sort of men regaining their manhood, but everyone doesn't have to just be men. But one thing, coming from a sports background and, pre blue ribbon era, where if you lost, you went home and you didn't feel good about it. And you had two choices. You could either wallow or work. And if you put in the work enough and came back competitive, you had a chance to redeem yourself. And I think that is a redeeming quality to be able to do that. And if you haven't developed that tool or that, sharpened that stone often enough, then you end up just kind of taking things on the chin and wallowing, which we're seeing a lot of that. And the idea of like competitiveness being a negative trait is absurd to me, because it's not that you are going out and, I don't know, trying to harm someone because you want to win so badly. It's a skill that can be developed and applied to anything. It can be and should be applied to competing against yourself first and foremost, that you are trying to be better than you were a decade ago or even a day ago, and giving yourselves opportunity to work and redeem so that you can keep progressing and moving forward. And you don't need someone to do that for you. You don't need a leader to come along and poke or push you in the right direction. It's something that you can just do on your own by checking in with, what's going on in your life, in your day to day, and where are there areas of opportunity that you could competitively improve on. And I think it's not the root, obviously, but I think it is something that has been sort of taken away from people is the ability to compete. And it takes a long time to develop that skill, and to not have it through those major development years, kind of sets people up at a disadvantage.
I agree. And I think what we're talking about, like not having that in key developmental years, like the participation trophy era, like this is one of the fundamental issues, or one of them at least, with kind of the education system, is it's breeding a culture of virtuous victimhood. This is what it's ingraining in people. Like, I want to talk about viruses that have come out over the last few years, like victimhood mentality. The victim mentality is so sticky and pervasive, and it's actively taught. Like, you can see it's taught in these institutions. Like, it's not your fault. You're perfect the way you are. It's the patriarchy. It's cis white men. It's the this, that, and the other. It's the weather. And if you lose that, you lose your power. They say power follows the blame finger. Right? Whatever you're pointing at and saying, well, it's because of him or her or my dad or my mum or my leg or my autoimmune disease. Like, some of it might be true, but so what? There's all your power. It's gone. You're basically telling yourself that the world out there has to be right in order for you to make a change. One of the most harsh truths, but powerful things that you can do is turn that finger back on yourself and try on this phrase for a change. My fault. It's my fault. Right? And you know what? Technically speaking, not all of it might be your fault. You might have just been in a bad accident. Someone was genuinely mean to you. The world can be cruel and there's malevolence, right? But it is your responsibility. It might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. So take it, my responsibility or my fault. What am I going to do? I can keep saying like, well, it's because of that, and it's because of this. Doesn't matter. Power follows the blame finger. Point it back at yourself. Oh, guess what? You just put the power back in yourself. Now you actually have something. You can hold on to something. Okay, this sucks, but I'm taking responsibility for it. What am I going to do now? And then get really fucking competitive with that thing. Because if you're not, you're just going to slip right back into the victim mindset, right? Competitors don't wait for the perfect situation on the world to be hunky-dory before they go and get it. They're actively out there scrapping. Winners find a way to win. You got to turn yourself into a winner. Whether you think you have a competitive bone in your body or not, you do. It's inbuilt. It's part of the human condition. And healthily expressed, it's a wonderful thing to have. Yeah, compete mostly with yourself, like you said. Compete with who you were yesterday. And then find inspiration in what's possible for you mirrored in other people. Because if other person's done something, why can't you do it too? They're actually not that much different to you. That's what we do all the time. Or I could never do that because this, and well, I could never live that life because of him or her, and they had this and I don't. That's nonsense. Yeah. These are all just excuses. Like, take responsibility. Some things are hard. Some things are harder for some people, no doubt. But if we're going to just wallow in that and say, well, that's why I'm this way and I'm going to be this way forever, then you're dead. You're as good as dead. You know, you need to just take it for what it is. You are not responsible for the hand you were dealt in life, but how you're going to play it is totally up to you.
Yeah. And we see, like, because we see the end result a lot of the time, it's hard to see the journey to get there. I think one thing that the positive thing of maybe of social media, or like having seen certain people grow, you know, sort of documenting their whole journey, is that you can actually sort of scroll back and see, oh, you know, at the beginning, this guy was not really a good singer, but he looks like he worked on it. And now, you know, look at him now. He's pretty amazing. Or, you know, athletes who, you know, if you really scroll back, you're like, geez, that guy looks pretty gangly out there and he doesn't move very well. And all of a sudden he's, you know, the best MMA fighter in the world. But to actually be able to see that journey versus only seeing the end result is important. And if you do the work to sort of, if you want to sort of have a North Star, someone that you're going to compare yourself to, or someone you want to admire that you want to work towards, to be able to actually sort of scroll back, if that's a decent term to use right now, and look and see, like, where did they actually start? Because there's no way they started as a world champion. They started as some gangly kid who stepped into a boxing gym and wanted to just see what happened, got messy with it, and kept showing up. And, you know, I think one of the big things that I've been able to see in my industry is that, or in our industry, is that the age that you show up and the state you show up in is irrelevant as long as you keep showing up.
Yeah.
You know, I've had 80-year-olds turn their life around because they just kept showing up, taking advice, learning, applying, doing. And I think if everyone could take some version of that lesson and just start doing and having a direction that you want to work towards, that would shift so many people's perspective. And I think for me, it's I used to maybe judge people when I saw them in certain states that they were in, you know, being unhealthy, or, you know, usually that. Now I more so feel compassion for someone like that, where I you know, someone didn't guide them along the way, didn't give them the tools or the groundwork to make better decisions or to take responsibility, or they were coddled or whatever the situation was, but they weren't given the right tools to improve themselves, or just at least take the responsibility over what they're doing. And the most obvious one is the food, right? It's like, I see every time I go in a grocery store, sorry, but I look at your grocery cart and I look to see what's in there. And then I look to see who's pushing the cart. And 10 times out of 10, I don't need to see the person if I look at the cart. And a lot of those decisions, what I noticed is that they are sort of the decisions a child would make. You know, I'm 10 years old and I want to eat whatever I want. And now I'm 35 and I'm going to eat whatever I want. And so my cart is going to reflect my development. And just like that 80-year-old, it doesn't, you can turn that around just by getting a bit more information and applying it with responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like that child archetype, Jung used to talk about this a lot, Carl Jung, that we have a bunch of adult children. They look like adults, they drive adult cars, they're in adult bodies, but they're stuck in the archetypal energy of a child, which is, I need the world to do my thinking for me. I can't really make my own decisions. And I'm clinging to this eternal childhood with safety blankets sometimes. A lot of the time can be food. And I'm not willing to be an adult, which the adult is going to have to make decisions for themselves and really think through the consequences of those and live with the consequences of those. But if you can be in this ignorant childlike mentality and just ignore that for as long as you can until you end up in the doctor's office and they're like, hey, you've got a diabetic foot, and if you don't change this, you're going to lose that thing in 6 months. And then it's like, oh shit, well now we're going to change things. And it's a tragedy in so many ways. Like, I used to have the same kind of judging mind that you just described. I'd think that people were lazy and slobby, and they may have some of those tendencies, but guess what, they didn't have the guidance. They are not set up for success. 90% of the food in the supermarket store is pure garbage. It's trash. Yeah. Our governments, the people that are supposed to care for our health, allow those foods to be in there. You know, this morning I posted a reel. It was an eggs and steak breakfast dish, and I posted it because it looked delicious. But I went into the comments, and the first 30 comments, I stopped scrolling. They were all about cholesterol and saturated fat. Oh my God, my cardiologist is going to love this. This is going to give you butt cancer, blah, blah, blah. I guarantee those people are eating like a bagel or some frosted mini wheats, or a meal replacement shake, or oatmeal, or, some fake milks and some fake ingredients and low fat this and some margarine spreads. So on one hand, it's a little bit of, there's blame to be had on the systems that enable this. And you could even say, not only do they enable this, they incentivize this because it's profitable. Yeah. But you can't completely point the finger of blame on them, because ultimately, like you said, people have to become adults. They have to think for themselves. They have to look at the choices and say, wait a minute, this ain't working. And if it's not working, I have to change. Otherwise, like, I'm stirring down the barrel of early death, all-cause mortality through the roof. I'm sure those people, sadly, are not living very vibrant, happy lives. When I see the 300-pound person in the wheelchair, the electronic wheelchair going through Walmart, like, I'm so sad for them, because the only joy they have is going to Walmart to get the sugary snacks. Like, that's it. That's all they got in life, Yeah. And who am I to tell them they should take that away? But at the same time, that's going to kill you. It's going to put you in an early grave. And I know that you could feel better. I know that you could. I know, but I don't know the support systems that you have. I don't know whether you have the desire to want to be better. Yeah. So it's a big bloody mess, man. But people fundamentally do have to grow up in a culture that isn't really enabling it, because we don't do such a good job of thinking for ourselves, because we've never really been taught that skill. We have this epistemic dependence on the opinions of other people, whether that's mommy or daddy, or the professors at school, or even influencers to this degree. Our favorite famous influence, I'm not going to think, I'll just listen to BioLane, or I'm going to listen to Michael Greger, I'm going to listen to Paul Saladino, or whoever it is. Well, the adult takes different opinions, sits with it, says, I like a bit of this, I like a bit of that, here's what makes most sense for me, let me go out and run the experiment and try it. If we can't, then we're kind of pulled on our whims. We're going to be just another cog in the wheel. Yeah,
the ability to critical think is low, borderline non-existent. I think also becoming a parent has helped me shape that idea as well, and seeing how a 2.5, almost 3-year-old reacts to what mom and dad do in the house. To see my guy JJ, want to come down into the gym while I'm working out, and he wants to hang off the rings, and he wants to balance on the balance board, and he wants to get on the rower, which, I had to outfit some modifications to the rower so he could use it. But it was just like such a clear picture for me. It's like, okay, he obviously sees what I'm doing, and then he wants to do it. And, he wants to help cook, and he understands, different foods and what they taste like, and, all that kind of stuff, which is super positive. And, but at the same time, I think you might've shared this, or anyway, I'd seen it, this mom who was plating food for her 1-year-old. And it honestly broke my heart to see it, because it's just this sort of perpetual lack of information that was missed for the now mom, and is now missed again for this child. And a 1-year-old, they don't know anything. They don't know anything at all they're doing is taking cues from their parents, and every morning you're getting a sugar donut cut up on your plate with a juice box. Oh man, that's a recipe for disaster, because unless that now child starts to figure out along the way, or they've got good influences in their life, hopefully at some point, that says like, hey, there's a different way to do this, and it's going to it's going to feel way better if you do it this way instead. Unless that person comes along, that lack of information is going to be perpetual for generations. And
it is.
I think we see it, you see it in Canada obviously too, but you see it a lot in the US, you see it a lot in the UK, and the system in place, and in Canada too, the system in place is not helping teach people how to even make the right decisions, or what the right decisions are. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with just like this excess of information and misleading information, right? It's like, I always say this with people, is like, you walk through the grocery checkout on Monday and the headline is, blueberries give you cancer. And then you check out again on Saturday and the headline is blueberries cure cancer, or whatever. It's some extreme like that. And so, if the information is so polarizing and so back and forth, how does someone who has not had an education in nutrition or exercise or anything else, how do they even begin to make an appropriate decision for them, or figure out what is going to work for them or not? It's tough. It's really, it's hard to see. It's hard to watch. Like I said, it is heartbreaking to see that.
Yeah, it is, man. It's an impossible conundrum almost. Like, what are those people supposed to do? This is why I've always been drawn to looking to the past for clues. It's the only reliable metric, if you remove all the noise, to think about, like, well, what have we done that got us here? And then people can attack that stance because they'll be like, oh, the average age of Neanderthals was 30 years old. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. That, we don't know if that's true at all. Certainly if it is, it's because of, medicines and infections and things like that. Some of it's great. Like, I'm not saying never see a doctor, never follow up. Like, no, like if you have a staph infection, get a bloody antibiotic. If I break my arm, I'm going to the doctor, trust me.
Yeah.
But if I'm dealing with something that's like lifestyle and chronic and it's mostly derived from food, I'm not looking to the advice of the experts, because if I ask this guy, I'm going to get this opinion. If I ask this guy, I'm going to get this opinion. So I have to borrow from something else, which is innately, what are we designed to eat? And we have extensive record of that, that it's mostly, a wild hunting and foraging kind of lifestyle. Depending on your ancestry and depending on your proximity to the equator, you would have had more or less carbohydrates, but those carbohydrates are not, pasta and whole wheat wraps. It's fruit, and it's things that grow seasonally, and it's tubers. But there's no culture that has ever existed until now that we know of, and I doubt we'll find one, that was ever vegan or vegetarian, for example. Some swing way more meat heavy, some swing a lot more plant heavy, but they all included some kind of animal product.
Yeah.
And this is another one of those kind of canary in the coal mine events now. Everybody's out there, the new longevity experts are saying, yeah, vegan's the thing that's going to do it. It's going to help you live to 100, and the blue zones and the centenarians and yada, yada, yada. Well, that's completely new and novel idea. Like, it's a kind of ludicrous idea when you try and square that circle with our evolutionary understanding and physiological understanding. But it's confusing, and it's sexy, and it's trendy, and it sounds good. And they make really expensive Netflix documentaries, and they put doctors on those Netflix documentaries, and they write books about it, and they tell you that red meat's going to clog your arteries, and your butthole is going to fall out if you eat it. And okay, like, the layperson that has no nutritional understanding is going to say, well, I'm going to listen to the doctor. I'm not going to listen to this crazy person online. What are your credentials? Because we have a bad state of credentialism in the West as well, which is they rule above all else. Doctors are essentially gods in our culture, and doctors do a lot of miraculous things, but I'll tell you what they do terribly is give nutrition advice. They don't know, not because they're stupid. They don't get taught. You have to find an independently well-versed and researched doctor to form an opinion. And even then, you're going to have everything from somebody like Dr. Sean Baker, who says all you need is red meat and salt and water, versus a Dr. Gregor, who says those things are terrible for you and all you need is bloody alfalfa. So what do you do? It's so sad, man. It's so sad for people. All I can hope that the good side of having access to a lot of information, the positive, the silver lining, is hopefully just, again, being able to entertain these ideas and say, this just resonates with me. It makes sense. Whether it's this, that, or the other, it doesn't matter. But let me try it, because you will know. Like, the results of your experiment are your life right now. I'll tell you something. If your joints hurt you, if you're carrying an extra 20 or 30 pounds, if you have no energy, if you have trouble sleeping, you can't get out of bed in the morning, if you need 6 cups of coffee to get through the day and you need a sleeping pill, if you just look like a melted candle, your diet's not working. The end. Fix it. And eat more real food. Like, if we could just do that, we're going to take you most of the way there. How much protein you need and how many plant, blah, blah, whatever. Just like eat real food that nature provided and trust that, you know, some of the healthy habits will go a long way too, and sleeping and moving and all of that stuff. But it can be really overwhelming, and I do empathize with people, which is why I love having chats like this, or doing the podcast, or having a social media presence. Because if I can find, you know, a handful of people that adopt this and radically change their life for the better because of it, then it was worth it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that was why I wanted to include the podcast, was just to have more long form conversations and not just add more noise to, or static noise to the social media platforms, because it does get really sort of convoluted and lost because there's equal or more bad information, or there's equal or more dogmatic information, we could say, or it's like, my answer is the only answer, and if you don't follow me, you're a moron. There has to be more nuance to it, and like, this, and hopefully more people are starting to understand this, that the best answer someone who's educated can give you is it depends. Depends on so many factors. Like,
imagine that.
It depends on where you live, what your ancestors, if you want to go that deep, is like, where are your parents from? How does your body react to certain foods? We got to pay attention to what has come and what is going. And it's not going to be like, here you go, Steve, here's a plan for you. Boom. No questions asked. This will work for everybody. That's stupid. That's not smart. That's not a good way to critical think. You have to have trial and error, and you have to pay attention. And I think that is also going back to something else we said, is like, if you're always in this buzz and you haven't created space and time to pay attention, then you're not even going to recognize that when you eat that processed food, your body swells up and you have terrible sleep and your joints hurt the next day, because you're just thinking, it's just more of the same. Versus if you actually take a moment and eat consciously, like you're paying attention to what's happening as you're eating, right after you eat, within hours and maybe even a day after you eat, what is your body doing in reaction? Do you have good energy, or do you crash? Do you have skin irritations, or do you feel, glowing and good? Does your tongue swell up, or do you feel amazing after you eat those foods? Like, people, and I'm even guilty of this. I used to eat a lot of just like sort of 1% dairy, and didn't realize that I was like, my joints are achy. And I just thought that was a normal thing, until I started paying attention to it and was like, oh, when I drink that milk, my joints are achy. Let me do something different here. Let me take that out of my diet and see if that improves. But
you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I've called it the bed of nails analogy for a long time. Like, if you slept from before you could even form a memory on a bed of nails for your entire life, you would think that was the comfiest night's sleep you could have.
Yeah.
And then, when you're 32 years old, somebody's like, hey, try this. This is called a Tempur-Pedic mattress. And you're like, oh, what the heck is this? It's a similar thing. Like, people don't know. They've spent all of their life inside of their body, and most of the time it's been dealing with something. Like, I never realized until I stopped doing this that I had horrendous gas, like ungodly amounts of gas, like radioactive farts could clear a room. And now if I fart, I'm like, oh, that's fun. It's so novel. Like, I'm like, shit, cool, a fart. That's awesome. I remember what that was like. I didn't know, as I just thought it was normal, or it was like, oh no, Steve just farts a lot. No, my gut was terribly inflamed.
Yeah.
I had an itchy scalp. I had psoriasis. I had always inflamed knees. And then that was perpetuated because, oh, you do jujitsu, man. Your knees are always going to hurt. No, they don't. They don't hurt at all today. At all. Yeah. And I've had 2 torn meniscuses and my knees feel like butter. And I'm older now. And everybody tells you, well, it's all downhill after 30. Maybe not. Maybe these are just myths baked into the cake of culture because most people are living the standard American diet lifestyle, which is just too much processed food, and they don't know how to receive the signals from the body. And I think that's one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself too, is the ability to listen. You know, like you said, actually think about it. Put food in your body and then listen. It's communicating with you all the time. And one of my favorite new quotes that I keep saying is, don't ignore when the body speaks for what the mind thinks. And what I mean by that is your body might speak to you when you eat something and it's saying, hey, this isn't agreeing with you. Like in Joe's case, the dairy. But your mind comes over the top and says, no, dairy's a good food. It's got calcium and protein. So shut up. And you ignore, you gaslight yourself because of what somebody else has told you, or because of what some book says, or because somebody said this thing is a superfood. And now you're ignoring your own lived experience because this guy or this doctor or this person who has 250,000 followers or this shreddy Kruger motherfucker that's got like 6% body fat said, everybody needs to eat eggs. What if you have an allergy to egg whites? And every time you eat them, you run into the toilet doing diarrhea? Like, maybe eggs aren't right for you right now. Maybe they can be. Objectively, they're full of great nutrients, but you don't ignore when the body speaks for what the mind thinks. Just try and listen a little more.
I would even say, like, I've had an experience too where even science can fail you, which we obviously know this, or some people know this, that it's not always accurate for the individual. And to the point where I've done a DNA nutrition panel where, you know, they kind of take a swab and they give you this printout of what type of endurance versus power profile and what type of diet you should be eating, what type of vegetables you should be focusing on. And one of the things that was in there for me was, consume mass amounts of cruciferous vegetables, which is like broccolis to keep it simple. And, you know, so I'm like, okay, great. Like, science, cool. Let's go for it. And so I started eating lots of broccoli, you know, buying heads of it and frozen version of it and tying it into breakfast and lunch and dinner. And, you know, the amount of bloat and gas that came out of my body was ungodly. Like I was like, what is going on? You know, I'm just not feeling good. And I, you know, had the foresight obviously to be like, what was the biggest change that I've made recently? Well, I added in a lot more cruciferous vegetables. Well, what happens if I take those away? Okay, let's get rid of them for a bit and see what that does. Oh, all of a sudden those symptoms are gone. But like you're saying, with the, you know, body versus the brain, my brain is going, yeah, but science, dude, like,
it's broccoli, bro.
Science.
Rhonda Patrick said so.
Yeah, cruciferous vegetables, everyone's supposed to eat those. It works for everybody. Why isn't it working for you? Are you broken? What's wrong with you? So to just like remove myself from that and say like, yeah, I don't eat broccoli. Still to this day, I don't eat it. You know, I'll pick around it. That's fine if it's on the plate, but I'm not going and buying a head of broccoli because I know what the result of that is, and it clears the whole house, unfortunately.
Yeah, man, it's a really good example, and people have all kinds of examples like that. I just don't think they've ran maybe the depth of experiment. They just don't realize it. You know, they think like IBS, for example, or something like that is totally normal. And actually, you know what? Maybe IBS is normal. Think about this. Maybe IBS is totally normal for all the people that have it when you're eating a diet that you're not supposed to eat. Yeah. IBS is a normal reaction.
That's your body
when
yelling.
You're eating a bunch of foods that don't agree with your constitution. Hyper-processed, hyper-palatable, seed oils up the wazoo, or even just for your particular digestive style, like the dark leafy greens because of the digestive problems in the plant anti-nutrients, the glucocorticoids and things like that, like it might not agree with you. And therefore you're having an actually normal reaction to foods that don't agree with you. So I think, if you're having any of that, and I think, skin issues are an obvious one. Skin issues for me are usually a manifestation of something that's happening internally.
Yep.
And then, gut is obvious one, bloating after meals. Like, I don't get bloating anymore. I can't remember the last time where I'm like, oh, I'm so bloated.
Yeah.
Like, my digestion is so on point. I think you should be having regular bowel movements, at least one a day. Like, ideally 1 to 2 bowel movements a day. They shouldn't be some days like pebble dashing and other days like you're trying to pass a Coke can out of your butt and you constipate. Like, it should be regular and smooth. You should be hydrating a bunch and finding the foods that agree with your constitution. And I will throw my 2 cents in the hat here as, one of these Instagram dickheads that says this is how everybody should eat. But I think mostly that is built around well-sourced animal protein, in particular ruminant meats. I'm not such a fan of like chicken because industrially what we've created with the chicken system is a disaster, and there's a lot of linoleic acid in the chicken and all of that. But I don't think I've come across very many, if any, people that struggle when they just eat like well-sourced meats and then they throw in the other easy to digest carbohydrates in the form of things like fruit, organic fruit. You want to get a little bit wild, maybe a bit of rice works for you, some organic potatoes work for you. But fruit over vegetables almost every time. Like, the fruit is the offering from the plant. It's bright, it's colorful, it's sweet, it's on the end of the stalk. It's basically saying, come eat me. These dark leafy greens that we laud after in our culture, they're rooted in the ground. They don't want to be eaten. They defend themselves. We rip them out because they've got sulforaphane in them and blah, blah, blah. And then we cook them and they don't taste good. I don't think anybody really genuinely enjoys them unless they drown them in olive oil and garlic and salt or butter. You try eating those things raw, nobody's enjoying that. And they don't agree with a lot of people. I'm not going to say everybody. I'm sure some people do great on them. But a lot of people would actually feel a lot better if they removed a lot of the things that they're told are superfoods. Like kale smoothies and chia seed puddings and all of this stuff. It's like, yes, some of that stuff can be good, but too much of it is going to irritate your digestion. Yeah. And you come back to something like, the animal-based diet is the bandwagon I shout from the rooftops these days. It's nose to tail animal nutrition. So it's meat and organs, it's honey and maple syrup, it's fruit, it's raw dairy and raw cheese, it's eggs. And then, depending on your constitution and how you digest foods, you might get a little bit wild and varied with your carbohydrates. You might add in some potatoes and rice. And, on that, I've been doing that for years. I feel amazing. My digestion's on point. I stay effortlessly lean. My performance in the gym is great. My recovery is awesome. And I never get bored. It's delicious food. It makes me feel good. I'm excited. I'm never not excited to eat steak and fruit, and raw dairy. I'm basically a baby cow at this point. Another one that, you can't drink raw dairy, man. Listeria. You're going to get tuberculosis. Yes, all of these fearful things that we do, you got to know about your sourcing. Yeah, you've got to know where it comes from. But you just got to understand the point I'm trying to make is that there's so much, again, misinformation, active disinformation, and noise that you just have to find what works for you. I didn't arrive at the animal-based framework immediately and be like, yep, this is it because somebody told me. I went through all kinds of transitions of that, various versions of paleo. I tried carnivore for a stint. I went way more plant heavy and was basically pescatarian for a little while. This is where I've landed now through my experimentation, which I've been running for a long time on my body. It feels great. Right? I hope that everybody can find that for them. And health then is kind of by accident.
Was running too, I felt the same way, that when I finally found the right foods for me, way less bloating, just felt great. My workouts were a good sort of barometer for getting the right foods and consistent energy levels and not needing caffeine. But it really took me 10 years to get there.
Yeah, it's a
and I think
journey.
one of the tough things is this. I think I kind of already said this, but just sort of the dogmatic approach to food. But one thing that is more interesting when you look at sort of ancestral eating is that at best, there were periods of time when we would eat both. There would be like when we would go and hunt and get a good feast of animal protein. And then when there was lacking, we would gather food from the ground or from trees or from plants, and we would eat that until there was another opportunity for a hunt. And that was kind of, if you look at that cyclically, like there was seasons until it became industrialized for the most part, that we would have lots of protein and we would lack protein. And we would work through that. But what I try to imagine is like in those days, the people who were living that lifestyle were probably sort of craving or desiring animal protein, right? If you're just kind of pulling dirty carrots, hopefully, out of the ground and eating that, or eating roots or whatever, it's like, it's probably not pleasing the palate very much, especially when I was doing some research for this article that I wrote that was like the average step per day was like 70,000 steps a day, which is about equal to 23 kilometers per day, every day as an average. So you can imagine like the amount of quality energy they would need to be able to do that without starving is going to be a lot of rich fats that are slow metabolizing energy sources that you pretty much only get from animal-based proteins unless you live in, somewhere where you can get coconuts as sort of the only other natural option for that. So it's going to come from like milk and meats and things of that nature. So just to sustain life, you sort of needed to have that. And that's pretty universal. Like you said earlier, like there's not many locations that would have lived exclusively off vegetables. And for sure, like, this idea of the blue zones. And if you've watched that, Living to 100 documentary on Netflix, which is nice and flashy and it's a great idea, there are other elements that they don't touch on in those environments that are critical to make that system work, of eating more carbohydrates and, lean proteins. Well, they're not walking 70,000 steps a day, and they're, living in enclosed sort of communities where they don't necessarily need to, work intensely. But even the way that we live now and eat now is not aligned with how our bodies have evolved either, because this is all new and novel.
Yeah, there's a couple of cool points there. Like some of the more like who still exists as kind of something like hunter-gatherer tribes. You've got the Hadza in Tanzania. And there's a few, you can plug this into YouTube. These are relevant, recent, like Paul Saladino went out there, and Brian Sanders from Human Optimization Project. So they've done like mini documentary series. It's very clear from just that, and I know it's only one group, but they prize animal proteins above all else. In particular, they love the organs, and you could argue that that's because of the micronutrient density in those, and the fat still chow down on brain and heart and get that extra fat and that DHA. It's very clear that anything they forage is fallback survival food. Like if they've had a successful hunt, they don't want anything to do with any of that stuff. Fruit, of course. If fruit's growing, they'll have fruit, but they will risk their lives for a beehive. Like they put it all on the line to climb a tree, start a fire, smoke out a beehive, and get honey. So their favorite food, when they ask them what their favorite food is, it's honey. And they will eat enormous amounts of honey in one hit, second only to meat. But basically, their whole diet, if they could choose it, they wouldn't eat a single plant. They would eat meat and honey. That is all they would eat. And that population is free of any kind of chronic disease. There's no atherosclerosis. There's no cancer in those societies at all. Yeah, they're more open and susceptible to getting cut from climbing the tree and potentially getting sepsis and a bacteria and all of that stuff. But it's really interesting, just looking to some of these still living cultures. They're going to live off the land. And for the most part, they're going to innately prize nutrition. They have no studies that tell them that there's most nutrients in these foods, but they know. Yeah, they know because they've had decades of living it and seeing it and the ancestral wisdom that's passed down. And the last point I'll make about that, which I think is really interesting too, is that anything we've got from an evolutionary lens of how people used to eat was also eaten outside. Like our whole lives were outside, almost always. Very in touch with nature, grounded all the time, in the sun if you were at the right latitude. And now 95% of our days as modern humans is inside under artificial light. And so the food is different, the light diet is different, the stress load is different. the total stress on our body from an EMF standpoint is different. And these, you can decide whether you think these are big or little things, but you could say it's death by 1,000 paper cuts, that there is a lot of little things, and these are not nothing. And I would say the bigger than that. I think the light thing is really interesting. That kind of seems to break the metabolic machinery that runs the show, can damage mitochondria and the energy production and the electron transport chain, because your body doesn't eat protein, carbs, and fats. That's our terminology. When it comes down to brass taxes, your body is using electrons and photons, and it's using mitochondria to produce ATP and currency units. It's all light, and everything that we eat is light slowed down into mass. Whether it's an animal that ate the grass to become the animal that we eat, or whether it's the plant that is the plant storing sunlight, it's all light. So there's another piece of the equation too, is the food matters. Absolutely it matters. But also, like, our light diets, too much blue light at night, too much staring at screens all day, never eating outside connected to the earth. I think regardless of what you eat, I am convinced that if you eat that same meal, even if it's a bullshit meal, but you do it outside in the fresh air with your bare feet connected to the ground, I think you're going to digest that better. I think your metabolic machinery is going to work a little bit better. Now, if you do good, healthy food in the appropriate amounts, also stacking that on top of it, I think you've got like rocket fuel effect on health gains. So I think there's lots to consider through that evolutionary lens, for sure. Nobody had to worry about the 401k or putting in overtime and all of that stuff too. They had different stresses, of course, but they seem to be much more acute and steep, like surviving an attack. But chronically, no. Chronically, it seems that when you look at these cultures now, they have pretty laid back lives. They're up before the sun and they do all the hunting before it gets too hot, and then they're back, and the rest of the day they're singing, dancing, playing, chilling, eating, grilling meat over the fire, enjoying the honey, and then they rinse and repeat. They're not coming home and being like, oh, I've got 40 emails I have to answer and my boss is such a dick, and on and on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's not to romanticize, like overly romanticize the past, because obviously there's a lot of hardship that goes into that too, but just finding maybe like modern ways to reconnect. What I want to kind of set up final points and takeaways for people, and maybe set it up like this. Like, for someone who is brand new to making an adjustment, what advice would you give for them? For someone who's been doing it for a little while, what's one thing that you would suggest to them to kind of rev up the engine in the best possible way? And for someone who's been doing it for a while, what is one point that you think is a good push to get them sort of to the next level, starting with the most beginner version of that and sort of working our way up?
So I would say for the complete newbie who's not really dipped their toes in yet, they're in the contemplation stage of like, maybe I should make a change, I'm just weighing up what it is. I think that a lot of what constitutes a good diet is actually what you take out. So that would be my number one tip for the beginner, is not even thinking about what you eat. I want you to think about what you're not going to eat. And I would encourage you to try. I mean, ideally, I would encourage you to try for 30 days, but I promise you, even if you do this for 7 days, you're going to feel it and you're not going to be able to unsee it. To remove the ultra processed foods from your diet. And it's a little broader than you might think. I don't just mean things like chips and candy. I mean, like a lot of the stuff that has a super long shelf life, and if you turn it over in the ingredients list, even if it has a list, it's a processed food, right? Like, it should be single ingredient food. So remove that kind of stuff. And I'm going to be a little bit cheeky, and I'm also going to include industrially processed oils in this. I really think this is a big one, which is eliminating the industrial seed oils or vegetable oils. So things like corn, canola, safflower, soybean. Shout out to Canada, actually. That's canola oil. Used to be called rapeseed oil, and nobody liked that name. So now it's
bad marketing.
Canadian. Ola is low erucic acid oil. So it's low erucic acid oil from Canada. So thank you, Canada, for giving us one of the most toxic oils on the planet that's now pervasive in our food culture. So I would remove those and cook with, really good quality olive oil, good quality coconut oil if you're into that flavor, but go to the animal fats. Don't fear the animal fats. I promise you, we don't have time to go into all of the reasons why. It's a lot of misinformation about this cholesterol and saturated fat piece, but I promise you it is. Take my crazy word for it and shoot me a DM and I can go deeper on this. But animal fats are the most stable fats in nature. They're nutrient dense. They have vitamin E. They have saturated fat. That is correct. But saturated fat is not the villain that you've been made to believe that it is. So replace ultra processed food. Building on that for our intermediate person, I would say a lot of intermediate people who think they're doing quite a few things well have usually not looked at the seed oil and vegetable oil issue. So that would be borrowing from step one, making sure that you guys in this intermediate phase you've been doing a little bit, recheck in with your oils, go into your cabinets, throw away the fry light and all of that shit, get it out of your house, restock with healthy real fats. And secondarily for this person, I would say eat more protein. And I'm saying this because I think most people dramatically underestimate the amount of protein that they're eating. I've done this with clients time and time again. I'm like, how much protein you eating? Oh, I don't know. I eat plenty. I'm sure it's around, if I had to put a number to it, I'm sure it's around, 130, 150 grams a day. They're getting like 80, 90. They don't eat anything. They eat like 2 eggs for breakfast and like half a chicken thigh for lunch and, a small piece of salmon. I think, building a thermic machine, an engine that runs hot, is fundamentally built on good balanced macros, but protein seems to be one of the key levers for increasing that metabolic rate, really ramping up. And the more protein you're including in your diet, the less room you're going to have for the other shit, basically. If you're eating extra protein, you're rebuilding, it's balancing your hormones, it's making you feel full and satiated, you're not going to be eating as much junk. Something I was thinking about posting on my social media recently is just like the 1 pound of ground beef challenge. It sounds so simple, but whatever you're doing, whatever your diet is right now, and this might apply to you, just try to start adding in 1 pound of ground beef per day. You can eat that in one sitting if you want. I have no problem taking down 1 pound of ground beef in a sitting, but you could have, a third and a third and a third kind of deal. But you're going to add in, if that's like 90-10 ground beef, you're going to add in about 80 grams-ish, 90 grams-ish of protein right there. Boom. Just add 1 pound of ground beef to your current existing diet and squeeze it in. Throw it in the omelet. Add it on the salad, whatever you're eating,
I would just caveat to that too and say real protein sources, not necessarily eating like a bunch of extra protein bars and protein drinks and shakes and things with, gum in the ingredients. Try to keep it to real protein sources. And I don't know what you feel about like lentils and things like that, but maybe lean more towards animal proteins as often as possible. If you feel obligated to include pea protein in there, sure, but make it come from real food and not these like bars and shakes. Yeah.
And borrowing from an earlier portion of the conversation around sovereignty as well, if you can, it's always smart to vote with your dollar and buy the best quality you can. I understand budgets are a very real thing and it's not the cheapest time to be a human right now. But if you can get yourself down to the farmer's market and shake the hand that feeds you and buy that regeneratively raised, organic, grass-fed and finished ground beef, it's a nutritionally superior product that's healing the land in the process. And you're putting the power back, that voting with your dollar thing is really important. And then I guess for the person that feels pretty dialed and maybe they're looking for a surprise edge, nutritionally speaking, if there's something in the previous two steps, continue with that. But maybe you want to look at like some hidden things now. Organ meats is a really interesting one. I'm super bullish on the nutrient density of sneaking some in. You don't need a bunch. They're super nutrient dense, so you can get away with a little. A little goes a long way. 1 to 2 ounces. Yeah, 1 to 2 ounces of fresh organs.
Very inexpensive.
Very inexpensive. Liver, heart, kidneys, kind of gross. But you can sneak these things in if you're doing the ground beef, for example, and you're making burgers. You can get a couple of ounces of liver, finely slice it, hide it in the burger. You won't even taste it. It's a nutrient storehouse is the best way to say it. You've got riboflavin, B3. You've got high amounts of vitamin A, form of retinol. You've got choline. You've got all of these digestive enzymes and peptides hiding in there. So gram for gram, organs can be some of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. And some of them get really interesting, if people struggle with allergies. Kidney's really good because it's high in DAO, and there's all kinds of stuff. Heart is really high in natural coenzyme Q10, which is really integral for the electron transport chain and obviously good for heart health. So organs could be a missing thing. And then I'd be starting to get into the lifestyle stuff for those high-achieving types that are nailing the diet. It's things like, hey, sleep. It's not that sexy, but it's really bloody important. And sunlight again, and getting out and seeing if you've never done this grounding thing. What happens if you start putting your bare feet on the grass for 20 minutes a day? If you can do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously great advice. I think those are good places to start for people, or good ways to sort of ramp up what you're already doing well. We could spend many hours, create a course around all these things we really wanted to. But I think the other sort of takeaway I would say from today is finding out what works for you, right? Because we can continue to just pile on more and more information, but actually starting to digest some of that information and experiment with it a little bit, and take notes, whether they're mental or you're actually writing them down, but starting to actually see like, what is your system? How do all these pieces work best for you? What can you add? What can you remove? And start to build this, program for yourself that is going to keep moving you forward. And back to the idea of being competitive is trying to find your best system, which is going to be different from maybe even someone else in your same household.
Yeah.
But starting to really maybe even put a pause on some of the information you're taking in and go back and look at your notes and break it down and actually see what you can do and apply and build out the best possible system for you.
Well said, my man. Well said. Like when it comes to this health stuff, try and become your own doctor as much as possible. Don't try and heal every ailment you have and, use discernment for when you go and seek medical advice. But like health and this food thing, the thing that you do 3 times a day, every day of your life, try and take a lot more ownership there. Try and become more sovereign there. Try and learn. That's where the root of the word doctor comes from. It's like doctoro in Greek was to teach. These were just teachers. They knew shit, and we've lost it all and now we've outsourced it. So learn some stuff like we're doing, and not to just be the person obsessed with mental masturbation, but apply it. Go run the challenge. Go run and see what happens for you. Do the experiment, and you will learn more from that than anything else that any of us could say, or anybody else could say for that matter.
Yeah. And I was going to go and ask into, sort of versions of the sovereignty for each of those things too. But I think the first thing and the most impactful thing people can do is around nutrition, because you tap into all of those boxes that are going to lead you other places. And if your system, like your body, is working well, then you have more space to improve the other things too, right? Like put the right fuel in the engine first, and then work out from there, because more things will fall into place. And next time we do a podcast, we can dive deeper into some sovereign or lifestyle low, medium, high points too.
Love that, man.
Okay. Steve, thank you again. It's always great catching up with you and picking your brain. We'll send people to your Instagram.
Sweet.
Your podcast, Peak Primal.
Peak Primal Health on the gram, and Radical Health Radio for the podcast.
Perfect. Okay, buddy. Thanks again.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate the chat, man.
Thanks everybody for listening to the episode. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, and follow the podcast to get notifications when new episodes drop. Each week I send out my routine report through Substack. In this weekly email, I'm sharing what I've been learning, listening to, and reading, as well as keeping you up to date with stuff coming down the pipeline from programs, podcasts, Instagram, and everything else in between. Click the show notes link to subscribe and stay informed. And a quick reminder for you about Bioptimizers discount. The products I've been using from them have been an absolute game changer for me and many others. Remember, you can get 10% off your order by using the code 3phase10. That's the number 3, PHASE10 on any of the products. And until next episode, stay well.